Hello and welcome to the April 18th gathering of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Hendersonville, North Carolina, a center for liberal religion in these parts since 1981. My name is Don Rollins. I serve the congregation as accredited interim minister. If you'd like to know more about our fellowship, I invite you to visit uufhnc.org, and you'll find a wealth of other information about the larger denomination by going to uua.org. We appreciate your interest in our progressive tradition. Let's begin this time together with words excerpted from teacher, activist, and leader in the eco-feminist tradition, Starhawk. Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere a circle of hands will open to receive us, eyes will light up as we enter, voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power. So community means strength that joins our strength to do the work that needs to be done, arms to hold us whenever we falter, a circle of healing, a circle of friends. It's in this spirit that we welcome Lianna Constantino to our online pulpit. Lianna's journey is remarkable, and I'd like to give you just a few of the highlights with credits to our fellowship's excellent editor, whom I can't name in this cyber format. Let's begin by noting Lianna makes her home in Sylva, North Carolina, serves as a pastoral counselor. She's a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, has chaired several Cherokee grassroots initiatives, including First Nations Safe Space, providing free telehealth counseling to Native American people during the pandemic, the Tribal Alliance Against Frauds, an intertribal anti-fraud task force. She's also a racial and social justice advocate. Lianna teaches foreign language at Southwestern Community College. Her numerous other activities include serving on the executive committee of the Jackson County branch of the NAACP, where she also serves as chair of the Religious Affairs Committee. In addition, she manages a nonprofit organization called Diversity 0 to 13, focused on racial and social justice equity. Other activities include facilitating a street medic collective called the Awesome Medicine Possums and its continuing ed medical skill sharing program. Currently a retired paramedic and midwife, Lianna volunteered as such at Standing Rock during the winter of 2016 and many other protests. We're proud to host Lianna as she gives witness across such topics as decolonization, intergenerational grief and trauma at Indian boarding schools, as well as Cherokee language, culture, and spirituality, and how to be a decolonized ally to Native American people. All this in one sitting. We're so glad to welcome Lianna into our community online too.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lianna, and I'd like to touch on several things today, including climate change and the pandemic from my own Cherokee perspective. And note, this is a Cherokee perspective and not the Cherokee perspective, okay? So the idea of balance is very important in Cherokee spirituality. I might even say it's paramount, in my mind at least. And most of what I believe has its basis in the idea of maintaining a balance in all things. So that's where I'll start. When the world is out of balance in some way, bad things happen. We have problems. When a person is out of balance in some way, they get sick. And we Cherokees have stories that inform us from infancy about pretty much everything, including this idea of the need for balance in the world and in ourselves. And the story of the disease, the origin of disease in medicine, reminds us of a time when things got out of balance because we as humans began to take more than we needed, very selfishly. We began to take things for granted and started disrespecting the animals, and this was not good, and it was duly noted by the animals. So our stories tell us that the animals were created first to start with, and we humans came later. And so when we got here, all the names had already been given out. So we had to borrow names like bear and otter and panther, etc. And this reminds us that we are not the masters of the universe, more like we are crunchy and good with ketchup if we're not careful. So this keeps us humble, remembering this, or it should have kept us humble. And the story of how disease came to be, and this is a very quick abridged version for the sake of time, tells us how we began abusing the animals, taking too many, and how the animals rose up to complain about it. And then they all decided to do something about it. They all had their own council meetings. The bears met and decided to go to war with us. But in the end, they couldn't manage the bows and arrows that they thought they needed to use to fight against us because of their long claws, and they didn't want to cut off their claws to try to manage those bows and arrows. So they gave up their idea of going to war with us, and that's a really good thing. Otherwise, we might still be at war with the bears. So they left it to the rest of the animals to decide what to do. The deer had a council, and they decided that hunters should have to say special prayers of forgiveness for any deer that they killed, that they shouldn't take more than they needed, and that kind of thing. And they taught our hunters those prayers, which they still say today. And when a hunter kills a deer, the chief deer, little deer, will go to the dying deer and ask, did he do it right? Did he say the right prayer? Did he ask for your forgiveness? And the dying deer will say, yes. And if he says yes, then little deer goes on his way and everything's fine. But if the dying deer says no, then little deer will follow that hunter all the way home and curse him with rheumatism. And so that's what the deer decided to do. The snakes and fish held their council too, and they cursed humans with things like dreams of scary snakes, dreams of snake breath and stinky fish, and things that would make you lose sleep out of fear and lose your appetite for fish and that kind of thing for their abuses. So that was their curse. And the birds and the insects and small creatures held a council too, and boy did they have a million complaints. They all shared many stories of how humans had abused them, kicked them around, neglected them, that they were invisible and didn't even matter at all. They were so little and inconsequential, and they were getting really tired of the humans' disrespect. Only the little ground squirrel didn't have anything bad to say about the people, and this kind of angered some of the other little creatures, some of whom scratched the little ground squirrel, and that ground squirrel still has those scratch marks on his back today. So the little creatures were so upset with the people that they followed the deer's advice and cursed the people with a disease for each of their kind. The little grubworm got so excited that perhaps the people would not be stepping all over him anymore, that he wiggled himself upside down, and he still gets around like that today. The women of the people called a council one night, very concerned for the people. They sat around the fire trying to think what they could do, but they couldn't come up with any solution. And from the forest, behind the trees, eyes were watching that council, and the animals knew that they had won. From above, another was watching and listening too. Yellow Poplar immediately told his whole family about the women's council from the sickness among the people. And they spread word to all the other trees and plants who lived in the forest. And the plants called a council of their own to decide what to do. Keep in mind, said River Willow, chief of the council, no animal has ever cared for us like the people do. Selu, the corn plant, stood up and said, the people work the earth around us, around my roots, and I grow tall and straight. They keep my seeds safe and dry over the winter, and my family prospers. I vote to save the people." After the voting, River Willow declared, "Everyone agrees. We will help the people overcome these new diseases. I will make medicine in my bark. When the people chew it, their pains and fevers will leave them. My white flower tops will take the poison from their wounds and insect bites," Yarrow pledged. Spearmint and peppermint made leaves to be picked and boiled into a tea to cure ailments of the stomach. Dandelion made medicine flow from her yellow flower to her roots. And every bush, tree, vine, grass, mushroom, and moss created a healing remedy for one of the diseases. Each plant in turn agreed, "Whenever the human beings call on me in their time of need, I will remedy for some disease, and I will appear to help them." That was how medicine came to the people. The ancient cures have been passed down through generations of healers. If our medicine people cannot find a cure that a sick person needs, they can ask the spirits of the plants to tell them, and the answer will be given, just as the plants promised long ago. So this story is a story of balance and balance lost, and what can happen when balance is lost and how it's regained. And throughout our stories, we have these examples that teach us to keep things in balance. We have another story. It's the story of the cedar tree that teaches something similar. That a long time ago, when the Cherokee people were new upon the earth, they thought that life would be so much better if there was never any night. So they beseeched the Creator that it might be day all the time and there would be no darkness. The Creator heard their voices and made the night cease, and it was day all the time. But soon the forest was so thick with heavy growth, it became difficult to walk and find the path. The people toiled in the gardens for many long, hot hours, trying to keep the weeds pulled, trying to keep the other plants weeded. And it got very, very hot and continued that way day after day. The people began to find it difficult to sleep and became short-tempered and argued among themselves constantly. Water began to dry up in places where they were used to finding water. So not many days had passed of this before the people realized they'd made a huge mistake. And once again, they beseeched the Creator, "Please, Creator, we've changed our minds. Maybe could you make it nighttime all the time? We think that would be much better." So the Creator paused at this request and thought, maybe we should give it a try, representing day and night, life and death, good and evil, times and plenty, and those of famine had always been the way with the way things had been created in twos, but maybe the people needed to learn a lesson. And the Creator loved the people and decided to make it night all the time as they asked to give it a try. The day ceased and night fell upon the earth, and soon the crops stopped growing. It grew cold, very, very cold. And the people spent so much of their time gathering wood for the fires that they barely had time for anything else. They couldn't see to hunt meat. With no crops growing, it was not long before the people were cold, weak, hungry. Many of the people died. Those that remained, still living, gathered once again, beseeched the Creator, "Help us, Creator. We made a big mistake. We should have honored your wisdom, that you made things in balance by twos, and we should have acknowledged that from the beginning. Please forgive us and give us back the night and the day as it was before." And once again, the Creator listened to the people and made their request true. And the day and the night became, as the people had asked, as it had been in the beginning. And each day was divided between light and dark. The weather became more pleasant, and the crops began to grow again. Game was plentiful, and the hunting was good again. The people had plenty to eat, and there was not much sickness, and they treated each other with compassion and respect. It was good to be alive. And the people thanked the Creator for their life and the food they had to eat, and the newfound balance again. The Creator accepted the gratitude of the people and was glad to see them smiling again. However, during the time of the long night, many of the people had died, and the Creator was sorry that they had perished because of the night. So the Creator placed their spirits in a newly created tree, and this tree was called the cedar tree. And when you smell the aroma of the cedar or gaze upon it standing in the forest, the Creator reminds us, if we are Cherokee, that we are looking upon our ancestors and our own people, our relatives, which is why we never burn a cedar tree. We burn the leaves, which are very sacred, but we'll never burn the wood. So the tradition holds that the wood of the cedar tree holds powerful protective spirits for us. So that story talks, again, about balance, how important it is, how it needs to be kept, and what happens when it's not kept. Another story that I wanted to share with you today is a story that we tell whenever there's an eclipse. It could be a lunar eclipse, it could be a solar eclipse, but whenever there's an eclipse, it is thought that the frog has swallowed the moon or the sun. So when that happens, what we're supposed to do is make a bunch of noise to scare the frog so that the frog will spit back up the sun or the moon and everything's fine. And the last time we had a total solar eclipse, everybody in Cherokee came out. Everybody was banging on pots and pans and drums and shaking rattles and whooping and hollering to scare the frog to give back the sun. And we had a great time. But this is also a cautionary tale. And I heard an elder say, when this happens, is the frog a villain in that story? And I had to think about that. Is the frog a villain? No, the frog's not a villain in that story. The frog is just doing what frog does, right? Like animals do what animals do. They're not bad, they're just being themselves. And if the frog was so hungry that he had to eat the sun, what is that telling us? And the lesson is that amphibians are barometers of what is going on with our waters. So if one of them is so hungry that it needs to eat the sun or the moon, maybe we should be paying attention to what's going on with our waters. So that's the idea behind it. It's a very simple story. It's a very old story. And what we do with it is very simple, but the lesson is big and needs to be paid attention to. So with all these stories and talk of balance, this leads me to my Cherokee perspective on climate change and eco-justice and the state of the world today. And I think about how I hear a lot of people talking about the need to steward the earth. We need to be good stewards of the earth. And that's great because, they're moving in a good direction, right? That's terrific. I'm not knocking it at all. But I do think about that perspective of being a steward. What does that mean to be a steward? If you're stewarding something, you're caring for it, right? You're taking care of it, which is good. We want that balance, right? We want reciprocal relationship with the earth and with all the earth's creatures. But if you really think about it, who's really stewarding who here? Because I think that when we talk about what we're doing for the earth, is there really anything that the earth needs from us to survive? Is there anything that we can give the earth or that we do for the earth that the earth can't live or survive without? Or is it the other way around? Because the earth gives us everything we need to live, everything. And all the materials for all the stuff that we surround ourselves with, right? But I can't think of anything that the earth needs from us that it can't live without. Even when I think about, what we breathe in from the trees, the trees exhale what we breathe in, and we exhale what the trees breathe in. We breathe in what they exhale. There's that symbiotic relationship. But if we weren't here, the animals would be doing it, So what do we really offer? If all the deer and all the bees and all the willow trees died tomorrow, we'd probably follow shortly after. But if we all died tomorrow, the earth would probably do a happy dance, shake us off like so many fleas, and green things would begin to cover over all the plastic and styrofoam we're worried about. Not that that's good stuff, but you get my point. And things would make habitats out of old rusted cars, and the green would begin to cover up the concrete, and the world would be just fine. The air would clear up, the water would clear up, the animals would start growing in number again, and we wouldn't be around to make any of them go extinct. So, because that's the sad thing, if we all leave tomorrow, we'd probably take a few species with us, which we've already done, which is sad. But when we talk about stewarding the earth, and I think about all of this, I think what we're really talking about is cleaning up our mess. That we've been bad guests at this hearth, and what we have to do now is work to clean up our mess if we want to survive, if we want to keep this place habitable for our survival. Because if we don't, and we don't make it, the rest of the earth will probably be fine. So I think that we need to keep that in mind when we talk about stewarding the earth, because we are not the focus of everything. And that's, again, what our stories of creation tell us. We weren't even created first. We were created last. We had to borrow those names, right? So that should be a reminder to us to stay humble and not be so centric in our views, that everything revolves around us. So another thing that I wanted to talk about was knowledge of place. That from a Cherokee perspective, the knowledge of place is very important. We are all steeped with the knowledge of where we come from. That's very important to us. And there are things that inform that as well. Things that happen in modern times too. For example, our mother town is at the mound at Gadua, which is just outside of Cherokee. It's the place where we had our first town. It was a peace town. And there's a mound there that is very small now. And when the tribe first was able to purchase that back and have control of it again, there was a lot of talk about what they should do with it. Oh, what are we going to do with this land? Let's make it a landing strip for rich people coming into the casino. Let's make it a golf course. Let's do this, let's do that. Let's develop it, or let's leave it alone. You know, a lot of people were for leaving it alone. And as they were talking about all of that, a groundhog pushed up some bones when trying to make her den. And somebody found the bones, and they looked human, and they called the police, and the police said, well, yes, but it doesn't look like a murder scene or anything. They're probably older, so they called an archaeologist, and the archaeologist said, yes, these are Cherokee remains, and they're very old. And long story short, what this ended up telling a lot of us is that this grandmother came up from her resting place with a little help to remind us that this was a sacred place to the Cherokee people, and that our people are buried there. And this place needed to be undisturbed. It needed to remain a sacred place as our mother town and not be developed into something commercial. And that sense of place, we were reminded by an ancient Cherokee grandmother of our sense of place and how important that was. So these things are integral to us all the time, from olden days into modern times. So our stories teach us about our cosmology, which leads to the understanding of place, which leads to understanding one's purpose. If you understand where you come from, that helps you understand why you're here. And this is important because if you have no purpose, you're just in the way. So purpose is important. There is a teaching, to me it's a teaching, a Cherokee teaching that I feel privileged to have heard, to be taught. And in this teaching, it goes that for any ceremony to be good, to be efficacious, to be a good ceremony, it has to be done by the people to whom the Creator gave that ceremony to do. It has to be done in their language, in the place the Creator put them to be, at the right time of the year, for the right reason, etc. And if it is, then that's going to be a good ceremony. But this is an example of why we don't see Lakota sun dances in Germany. Or if we do, well, I would raise an eyebrow. It's why we don't do Cherokee stomp dances in France. That's why. It's part of why no person could ever be a Cherokee medicine person unless they speak the language fluently, really fluently. That's all part and parcel of that. Also, our values differ from what might be considered historical or traditional American values. There's a disconnect between indigenous ideas of what is important and what isn't, what's valued and what isn't, who is valued and who isn't. I like this story of Red Jacket, who was not Cherokee. He was a Seneca orator, a very famous Seneca man. And I'm going to do a little Turtle Liar Club story here of him kind of paraphrasing something that he talked about once. But the modern story goes that Red Jacket was talking to someone who was not Seneca about the moon and our relationship to the moon, and he said, there's a difference between how my children look at the moon and how your children look at the moon. Your children look at the moon and they see a place that they want to study and analyze, and they want to go there, and who knows, maybe one day they'll want to live there, especially if they can't live here anymore. Kind of, and my mind kind of went to, the next place to exploit potentially, because this place has been made uninhabitable. But they're going to want to know everything there is to know about the moon and how it works and why it does what it does and what's it made of and all these things. The difference between your kids and my kids is that my kids already know all they need to know about the moon. They know why it's there. They know what their relationship to it is. And that's all they need to know. And the end. So it's just an interesting illustration of this difference in how we value things and how we view things, how we think about things. Our ideas of poverty and wealth are very different from the ideas of poverty and wealth in some other cultures too. The notion that people would kill over a yellow rock is very weird. Or pieces of paper. That seems inconceivable. When we gambled, no one ever went hungry or lost their home as a result of the gambling. Many of us still practice what we call Indian giveaways, where you might spend an entire year saving your money to buy things, accumulating things, making things like blankets or beaded jewelry or braided belts or whatever, acquiring televisions or kitchen appliances or whatever, and just to take them to a giveaway and give them all away to the people. People come, you lay your stuff out on blankets, and people who need stuff come and take what they need. They take whatever they see that they need, and that's a giveaway. And it seems like a very foreign idea to a lot of people. But the idea of being rich or poor didn't exist for us until the idea of capitalism came along. I want to move on from that then now to relatives, the idea of relatives, which can be a different idea too for non-Indigenous people. I want everybody to think about our mother's blood for a minute. Everybody has a mother, right? And because we were born of our mothers, there's a blood connection that happens that takes every one of us, every single one of us, back to the very first mother ever. Because if you think about it, you had a mom, your mom had a mom, right? And since she was born, she exists, she had to have had a mom, and she must have had a mom. And so you go all the way back all the way back, all the way back. They all had a mother all the way back. It's just logic because they all exist, right? So you go all the way back to the very first mother where we all connect, which is one reason why a lot of indigenous people will say we are all related. The Lakota have a common saying of that, Mitakweasin, we're all related. And I think this is why. And we all recognize this. So in a way, we all share the same blood, all of us. And in a special way, with women especially, that blood is actually in us. Cells from that blood are actually part of us because we shared that blood directly with our mothers and our mother's mother and our mother's mother through the umbilical cord, right? And through birth. So this is a special idea. So our women have a very special place in our society. Our two-spirited people have a very special place in our society. Every person is valued. Every person is included. Nobody gets excluded unless they do something horrible. And a lot of indigenous people have a belief that if someone does something bad, they shouldn't be banished. They should be brought in even closer. And they should be reminded. They should remember who they are and what their place is in the tribe. And everybody helps to do that. So that sense of community is very important in that sense of tribal connection. Many indigenous people believe that prophecies are connected to our ancient memories through our DNA, and that's been passed down to us from our ancestors. Indigenous midwives have many stories of blood memory, rebirth, regeneration, transformation, and of water being our very first environment and our very first medicine. Water carries other medicines too. So water is a very important medicine, and as we say now, water is life. We've always known this, but it's been paramount in the last few years because of what is happening to our water. So medicine people often have a blood memory of place as well, like we were talking about how important place is. Knowledge that says when you go to a new place, nope, we've never been here before. Or, yeah, we've always been here. We belong here. The plants, the animals, the stars are familiar. They'll work with us. They've heard our language before. This is our place, or this is one of our places. And midwives, who are often midwives at death, in death as well as birth, are intimately aware of the similarities between the experiences of birth and death. Both involve traveling from one form of existence to another through a tunnel towards a bright light, right? And usually into, hopefully, the loving arms of family, either way. Birth and death can both be uncomfortable, even painful journeys until the travelers finally arrive at their destination, often in quite different and alien forms. You know, when you're being born, prior to that, you've lived in a watery environment for, since you were created, right? For 9 months, you've been in this watery, dark, quiet, soft environment, kind of enclosed and tight, and then all of a sudden you can kick out and stretch out and you're making noise that you've never heard before and you have to breathe air. How weird is that? It's all very strange and foreign, but when you get there, you realize, I'm okay. Oh, okay, that was kind of scary and weird, and this is totally foreign and alien, but I'm okay. And look, there's people here who love me. And it's the same thing. Just, it's the same but different. Right? Indigenous peoples acknowledge both of these things as journeys towards a rebirth, and they're not to be feared. Many stories tell us about these journeys. They teach us that even when we must succumb to something like COVID-19, which is sad and hard, it's not the end. Remembering this can be healing too. We survive both birth and death. So in thinking about the pandemic from an Indigenous perspective, we must remember that Indigenous people have a traumatic memory of infectious disease, because these diseases were not always something that we caught by happenstance. They were also used as a genocidal tactic against us. And those of us who survived became very resilient. So some of us, including me, with some other Indigenous folks, we co-authored a manifesto about the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. And we sent an open letter of support from our people to the Indigenous people of Brazil last year. And I'm going to read just a tiny little segment of it to you. The connection between colonialism and trauma is deep-rooted. In this time of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is up to us to transmit our experiences and tell our stories of how the pandemic has and is affecting us. We must openly chronicle what settler governments did or did not do for us in our time of need, what we asked of them, and how they responded. As Indigenous peoples, we have always had to fight to get the world to acknowledge the violence of colonialism and its destruction of our people, lands, and way of life. It is important that we engage in memory work to tell our stories. We must explore the past through our tribal, personal, and community memories, telling others of what has happened to us as we have had to bear the weight of the colonial crucible.
We once again thank Lianna for coming our way and for her wisdom and her challenges, and that's a rare combination. So we bring this time to a close with these words from Episcopal priest, teacher, and author Carter Hayward. She tells us, "Love is the willingness to participate with others in the healing of broken lives. Love is the choice to experience life as a member of the human family, a partner in the dance of life, the lighter of torches of hope. Thus have we gathered, thus do we part for now. Blessings, everybody. Come see us again next week."